Let's talk about HLG. Do I still recommend it? Yes, especially if you like it. So what I'm talking about it here on this LG OLEDs, you step on select mode 11131111, and then you change the EOTF to HLG. So you open the games on SDR, but we are forcing the TV into the HLG HDR format. And the reason why this looks good, it kind of works, is because HLG is backwards compatible with SDR. So the problem is the colors look wrong. And sometimes the colors look terribly wrong. Okay, but for gaming it's not a big deal. And if you don't notice any problem, enjoy it. It looks fantastic. In terms of HDR, it looks amazing. But we know better now. We have better tricks. So on the PC, better use the SDR HDR trick that I share with you. On the PS5, better use the HDR always on option with my recommended settings if you want that pop. That's gonna look better in my opinion. Even when I haven't tested it on the PS5, I tested using the auto HDR from Windows 11 and lowering the max CLL to 250. So I simulate the PS5 experience, and the only thing that I cannot be sure about is the black level. I am assuming that there's no black level rays on the PS5 when you use HDR always on, based on what I've seen. Especially from Gaming Tech, he compared the auto HDR from the Xbox and the HDR always on with the PS5, and he doesn't see any black level rays. Okay, so I much rather use that HDR always on the PS5 with my recommended settings, or even with the dynamic tone mapping on settings. And yeah, it's not going to, so with the dynamic tone mapping on settings, it might not look better than HLG in terms of the HDR, but it is easier. You don't have to get a service remote, and to use my recommended settings you need to get a service remote or use the PC with the color control app, so you have access to the service menu, and then you need to mess around with the factory calibration, and that's not for everyone. Okay, so it's your choice. Try both, see which one you prefer. But on the Xbox, you have a great auto HDR. Based on what I've seen, the auto HDR from the Xbox supports the system level calibration. It looks fantastic, but there are some games that do not support that auto HDR on the Xbox. They do not have native HDR. So what are you gonna do? HLG. That's the only option I know of that you can use. So I'm going to give you a second recommendation for HLG in case that you notice that the red color is wild. Like, you see, the problem with this HLG trick is that the red color, especially all the colors that have red, they look wild. That red is popping ferociously. Okay, so I'm gonna give you a second recommendation. So what I recommended for the HLG trick was, and I still recommend it, is have the TV on native color gamut. This LGC one specifically, we can change the color gamut to native. And the reason why I recommend that is because we are on SDR. The color gamut of SDR is Rec 709, but then we are forcing the HLG format. We need that wider color gamut. So by having the TV on native color gamut, we have access to those colors. So when you push brightness, you need color volume to go along with the brightness. Otherwise, the colors look desaturated. And that's what happens, for example, with the HDR always on settings that I recommended for the PS5. When you increase the contrast on that service menu, the sub BC, when you increase the contrast, you need to increase the saturation along with it. Otherwise, the colors are going to look desaturated. So for HLG, we have to do the same. We have to get that wider color gamut. So my recommendation for HLG from the beginning, it hasn't changed in terms of the colors. I think this is the best option. The colors look wild, but I think it is the best looking option, which is basically color gamut on native, and then the saturation, lower that to 50, and then you use warm 50. But if that looks wild to you, this is what I'm going to recommend you to fix the red color. So do not force the color gamut to native, just keep it on auto. So we are on Rec 709, and I'm going to show you that we are on Rec 709. And then you increase the color depth to 65. And the reason why we have to increase that color depth is because we need to push a little bit more the colors, because we are pushing the brightness. So when you push brightness without color, it looks desaturated. Okay, that's what a wider color gamut is all about. That's why this idea of pushing the TV into BT 2020, for example, I'm gonna show you. You see warm 50, color depth 65, color gamut auto detect. This would be my recommendation if you want to avoid that red color being wild, basically. This still looks incorrect, but it is not going to make that color red pop that much. And you might love it. You might love that color red popping ferociously. So enjoy it. But if it bothers you, try these settings. So let me explain. 111, 3111. So if we change here this colorimetry to Rec 709, you will see that the colors don't change. So we are in Rec 709. See? Auto. We are on Rec 709. See? So now BT 2020, that is the color space for HDR. And HDR is ST2084. But this looks terribly wrong because we are on SDR right now. So the color space we are in right now is BT 709, Rec 709, which is the SDR color space. So when you have auto, the color gamut on auto, that's where we are. So that's why we need to increase the saturation. So what I was gonna say is that this idea that, okay, let's just use BT 2020 on SDR so we can get more colors. It doesn't make sense because when you push that wider color gamut, you need to have more brightness. Okay? Otherwise, it's just gonna look wild. Very, very wrong. And of course, you can decrease the color saturation, but then you're gonna end up on Rec 709 anyway. So if you force the colorimetry to BT 2020 on SDR and then you lower the color saturation, like, why are you even doing that? Like, you're gonna end up on Rec 709 anyway. So there's no reason to do that. It is not gonna give you a better result. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Again, just to summarize, do I recommend HLG? Yes. It looks fantastic. Use it if you like it. Even if you have a PC, even if you have a PS5, use it if you like it. But really, the strongest recommendation I can have for HLG right now is for the Xbox, for games that don't support native HDR and they do not support the auto HDR from the Xbox. I don't know how many of those you have. Probably not a lot. Because at least on the PC, on Windows 11, most of the games are now supporting the auto HDR. And I would much rather use that than HLG. Okay? So remember, I didn't know how to fix the HDR. And auto HDR was not even a thing back then when I discovered this HLG. And the reason why that video was so successful, it was not because of the discovery. Yeah, I discovered a cool setting that works. Is that you can see on my face, you can see my emotions that I was so happy discovering this. I was not even able to show you how it looks. That video looks terrible actually, but you can see it on my face. I'm honest, I'm so happy because I didn't know how to fix the HDR mess that we have. And then I discovered this trick that works for every single game. So I was trying to make my LG C1 look good and I was frustrated, and then I finally figured out a way that works for every single game. That's why I was so happy, and that's why people, spread that video like wildfire. Okay, so it's still an option. You can still give it a try, but we know better now. We know how to fix native HDR games, and we know other tricks that look better, in my opinion. The colors are not so incorrect, especially we don't have that red push. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Also, HLG is still a good option for black frame insertion, because when you use dynamic tone mapping with HLG, that's probably one of the brightest options you can use. So for example, if I use OLED Motion Pro High and then I use dynamic tone mapping with HLG, because I was using tone mapping off. I don't know if I even mentioned that. Yeah, tone mapping off is the best option, in my opinion. You can try HLG, it looks good too. Looks a little bit brighter everywhere, but tone mapping off gives you the best contrast, and it gives you the maximum peak brightness for the highlights, better than HLG. But if you use dynamic tone mapping with HLG, the colors look a little bit more washed out. So then I would definitely recommend you that native color gamut. So for dynamic tone mapping, I much rather use native color gamut, saturation 50, warm 50. But for black frame insertion, this dynamic tone mapping is actually very good. Very nice, because it gives you a lot of brightness. It gives you very, very good brightness. So it basically looks like there is not black frame insertion at all. It's a very, very good option for black frame insertion, in my opinion. It's probably one of the brightest options. Now, is this better than the SDR HDR trick for black frame insertion? No way. On Windows 11, no way. The SDR HDR trick with tone mapping off, it looks fantastic. It might not look as bright as this, but it looks fantastic. But if I turn on dynamic tone mapping, then I get this brightness and I do not get the wrong colors. The colors look good. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions.